Patience, I think, is something that I'm still working on, but I've gotten better.
Angie and I sat on a panel maybe a couple months ago, and so I'll kind of pick up from where she and I left off. She and I also worked together at OPM before coming here to DHS, and she and I lived through some pretty fun but also challenging times at OPM. But one of the things she and I talked about on the panel that we were on recently was really understanding early on the critical importance of networking and kind of building your team. And when I say team, I don't mean the people that are working alongside with you in your office necessarily, but just who are those people that you are adding to your network, that you are seeking mentoring from, that you are aligning yourself with or learning from, and they don't have to necessarily be all in your line of work. But you'll be surprised as you go through your career in government or elsewhere, how you never know when you're going to need that network. You never know when you're going to need that advice. And it seems kind of simple, and it sounds like we should all sort of know that, but you'd be surprised. Oftentimes in government, you can find yourself in an agency where suddenly there's some sort of a crisis or some really newsworthy or noteworthy thing that's happening out there that has a lot of attention in the press, and certainly at DHS, we are certainly in the press right now. But you'll find that you're going to need that network. You're going to need those people, not just the people in your immediate circle. So I would say really take the time to realize how important it is to build that, to create it, and to nurture and sustain it as you go through your career.
That's awesome. Thank you. John?
So these are all great answers. Nina's on networking is critically important. As an IT guy who buys commercial IT, I have to have a network out there in the industry. When something breaks, I've got to be able to call the right SVP, EVP, or CEO. Hey, I need help. Patience. As an aviator, I really become complete with patience. I'm still working on it, but I'm going to spin it a little bit differently. I think success is defined by a couple factors. I think above all is honesty and integrity. You really have to maintain your integrity and your ethical approach to things as you go forward. I'm going to say hard work, but it's really smart work, right? You have to work. If you don't deliver the product, you're just not there. But I think a critical factor that sometimes gets overlooked is persistence, stick-to-itness. Hey, I'm going to see this through to the end no matter how hard this thing gets. Those are factors I look for in people, and I'll add another one, humility. Jeff Bezos, I don't know if you guys read the articles over the last couple of weeks, he talked about how you determine if a person's intelligent. And he said, willingness to learn from their mistakes. So he asks a question during interviews. Tell me about something you messed up. And those aren't the words he used, but what you learned from it. So the ability to change your mind based upon making a mistake is a mark of intelligence. And I ask that in interviews all the time. Hey, tell me something you did that shifted how you look at things. And generally I want to hear about a mistake and how you adjust it. The ability to learn from things is critical. The ability to accept that you're not always going to succeed. Sometimes you're going to fail, and it isn't that bad.
That's great advice, actually, from all of you. I've heard a lot of common themes. Take the long-term view, persistence. I've heard throughout our time together, be strategic. What we can bring to that is reach out, provide the intel, help folks in your respective line of business articulate the business need that we can act on. And a lot of it just comes down to basic communication. I just have kind of one last question as kind of a wrap-up question. That's, and it builds on that idea of communication. What challenges do you see, or what's your observation that sometimes as lines of business we talk past each other in how we use language? If I used a word like certification, okay, that means something completely different to every one of you, is my bet. So how should we going forward, and an audience going forward, how should we be trying to build those communication skills? With all that you've said already, go ahead, Neil, please.
Okay, so that's always been a challenge for me in the procurement world, because when you build your credibility in my world, and probably the same for my counterparts here, you want to be a technical expert in your world, right? But to your point, sometimes we're using terminology that's just either the same or we just don't understand it across. So, one of the things that I would suggest is yes, you're going to become a technical expert in your line of work. But I think if we take the time to speak in common English, and that's one thing that can be a challenge in the world of government contracts, speak in plain English with your counterparts and your customers to basically try to understand their challenges and their problems. And if you do that in sort of that common English sort of way, you're going to be less likely to be throwing around, technical jargon and things that may have multiple meanings or meanings that don't mean much to the person that you're interacting with. Soraya Korea is not here today, but I will say that I've learned a lot of that from her. It's easy when you're in government contracts to spit out, provisions of the federal acquisition regulations. Let me tell you what this part says and that part says. But your customers don't want to hear that. They really want to hear you listening to what their challenges and problems are, and you talking about how you can help solve them. And so, yes, you have that technical knowledge in the back of your head, but it's not necessarily what's coming out of your mouth when you're talking with one another.
Sure. I see, Rich, you were nodding your head that whole time.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. Once again, as I mentioned earlier, that security is in the business of mitigating risk, but you have to understand, we have to understand that we're also there to enable the mission. So if at the end of the day, we're not enabling the mission, then we're failing miserably. So I think for us, and my recommendation is very similar to Nina's, is really getting out there and understanding a little bit of the language of your stakeholders, understanding what it is that they are saying, and them understanding you a little bit. So we all kind of understand each other's language a little bit, like kind of what we've done up here with the CXOs. I think we all understand a little bit of our lines of business, and because we have to in order to collaborate and get some of the things done, we actually have to take that opportunity. So that would be my recommendation: is really try to understand the lingo, go see them, get a briefing from them, those kinds of things, so you understand what it is that we're really doing at the end of the day.
Hey, real simple. IT has got more jargon you need to shake a stick at. My folks like to use their jargon, and I always tell them, hey, pretend you're driving your grandmother or grandfather to church, how would you speak to them? Right? You should do that. But from your point of view, if you don't understand what they're saying, ask them. Right? There's no stupid question. If you don't understand what it means, you should ask. And that puts them in the position of having to explain themselves in simple English.
One thing I would stress, though, is that people communicate and learn in a variety of different ways. So never think about the secondary, third method of educating somebody or talking to somebody or writing an email, sending a text message. Think about there are different ways that people absorb this information, and we don't all think the same way. So use different forms of communication to stress the same point.
Thanks, Rich.
I think a few different forms of communication along those lines that have seemed to be a little bit more successful for me is in our world. You're right. There's a lot of jargon, and we can't really go a whole sentence without using some kind of acronym. But it's really helpful. What I've found is to be able to take a lot of complex information or complex scenarios, policies, and things like that, and boil it down to something incredibly simple that people can just understand. And I think that that's an art form, and I'm not sure that we've really mastered that entirely. Sometimes we think the more we write, the smarter it makes us look. But I would suggest that, especially if you're writing up your chain, your emails and things just got to keep getting shorter and shorter, right? Because we don't have time to read the 15-page emails. We just need it boiled down to what's the bottom line, what decision do you need from me, what's your ask, what do you need me to do next? And so that would really kind of be my advice to you, is like simple is really, it's not only an art form, I think it really does show a level of intelligence when you can take things that are complicated and make them simple. Yeah, the other advice I would give is just to make things more visual. We're learning more and more, and yes, people learn in a variety of ways, but I will tell you, the more that we can take our complex things, and whether it's our data or whatever, and we make it more visual so that people can quickly grasp what the situation is, whether it's red, green, or yellow, or a bar chart, or whatever it is that you're trying to display, that seems to also be something that's really starting to prove to be successful. Thank you.
How are we doing on time, Lisa? Okay, so does anybody in the audience have a question that they want to ask? I think we have time for a question or two. Please.
I think one of the challenging things that I've observed within the department is the security clearance situation where components don't accept each other's background investigation when we're one DHS family here. And so I have challenges with bringing in contractors who takes months and months, even it's over a year, and they still don't have access. And so it's a burden on the employee to, email, and it's just logistically trying to get them the information they need to do the work. And what is the department doing about like using, some comes from headquarters and come to CBP, and CBP doesn't accept that security clearance. And I just don't understand why that can't be streamlined or worked on quicker.
You must be a plant. So actually we do. Reciprocity is honored in this department, just like it is across the U.S. government. Now, with that said, we're not perfect, and there's some components that have special requirements. And I say that in quotation marks. In some cases, those special requirements are unnecessary. We just recently last December, we chartered a personal security operations task force to take a look at what we're doing across the department to make sure that all our process procedures are standardized. We have standardized instruction, we have all that, standardized policy. But in the execution mode, and none of us were naive enough to believe that in execution mode that was happening to 100%. So we went out and did the review. We looked at best practices of the Department of Defense, the U.S. Army's Center of Excellence on how they do intake of clearance processing, the DoD CAF where they do the adjudication for all clearances. Those of you probably all know that each component has a personal security shop, if you will. So we looked at all that and came with 23 recommendations, a lot of which will result in better standardization across the department for both federal employee and contractor employee onboarding. I think we've made some good headway partnering with CHICO, partnering with CPO. We've reiterated some policy with regard to expedited onboarding for contractor staff with clearances, expedited onboarding for people that are in the same level, sensitive position. So, without getting too much detail, as long as the position requires the same level of access and they have a current in-scope investigation, should not be any problem with them transferring between components, and certainly within the component. So if you're having a specific problem, I'm certainly happy to talk to you, depending on what component you're from, we'll certainly happy to look at that. But yeah, we are addressing that both for federal employees and contractors. There's a lot more there, but I could go on for about 2 hours on that, so I won't bore you. But we definitely recognize that as an area that we continue to get better.
Thank you. If you have any other questions, get to one of us, get to Burl or Lisa with your question. We'll get it answered for you. I want to thank the panel. We've exhausted your time, but it was worth the price of admission and more. Thank you so much for being here with us.